Pro podcast live on YouTube, well, on Google Hangouts, I should probably say more accurately. I'm Tim Danton, Editor-in-Chief of PC Pro, and with me today I have Darian Graham-Smith.
Hello, everybody.
And also Barry Collins.
Hello.
Hello. Right, and we're going to start off with you, Barry. Actually, Barry, what's the most expensive thing you've bought this week?
A new office, actually. My new office is being knocked up in my garage today, so that was quite expensive.
Okay, but probably not $26 billion worth of expense.
It hasn't cost me $26 billion, Tim. No, if I had spent $26 billion on an office, it would be a lot bigger than the mileage. But I've probably got a lot better value for my money than Microsoft has. They have indeed managed to spunk $26.2 billion in cash, not one of these sort of we'll give you 50% shares, 50% cash deals. They've put themselves into further debt just to hand over the cash to LinkedIn, which is, as I'm sure all of our readers will be aware, is the sort of business social network. Oh, I did that again. Please, someone stop me doing the fingers in the air. I've got
Well, they don't show up on the audio recording, thankfully. So.
No, and now I've just ruined it for that. But anyway, so LinkedIn is the network where everybody puts their CV for no apparent reason, and you have a list of 500 friends, of which only about 24 you've ever met, and it's very, very difficult from my perspective to work out quite where the value is here. Microsoft paid a staggering premium for this. It was something like a 50% premium or 40% premium on the share price. 50% premium on the share price as it closed last Friday, which is extraordinary. Not least because LinkedIn earlier this year managed to shed 40% of its market value in a single day when it announced that its revenues were much lower than expected. This isn't a big money spinner either. LinkedIn makes losses, and quite significant losses. It managed to lose around 165 million in 2015 on revenues of $3 billion. So it's got plenty of money coming in. It just there's a lot going out as well, and that is largely, according to this piece in The Economist I read shortly before coming on there, down to the stock-based compensation that it hands to its employees. So it ends up offering up quite a lot to its staff. So for me, I'm absolutely staggered that Microsoft paid this amount of money for what's effectively a social network. I don't know what you guys think.
Did you say that was twice its market cap?
No, it's not twice. It's about 40%. It's previous market cap.
Yeah, well, that's a bit surprising. I mean, that's the kind of thing that you do when you're worried that someone else is going to snap it up, or indeed when the service is desperate not to sell, I guess. But that bit is surprising to me. It makes me wonder what was going on behind the scenes. The rest of it does make a sort of degree of sense, because I mean, I think Microsoft has sussed that what you need right now in this, it's always really been the case with the internet. What you need is you don't need the service that's going to make you $1 billion tomorrow, but you need to have the people so that you can roll things out, tighten the screws, boil the frogs, and so on. Attracting people to use your platforms is the difficult part. I mean, I think Microsoft's really found that with Bing, and it's probably finding it with Edge to a certain extent. So if you can just buy users rather than attracting them, that's valuable.
Well, it is. I think it's also valuable in its own right. So just a couple of things. Be a bit careful if you actually look at the historic value of LinkedIn. Before the massive fall you talked about, Barry. So Microsoft effectively bought it, I think it's about $190 per share.
Yep.
It traded at over $200 a share for several months until it had that plummet in February. So it's traditionally, actually, it's not necessarily being overvalued. The other thing to bear in mind is, well, have a guess. Nice little pop quiz. What do you think is the market cap? So we should explain. Market cap is very simply the total value, total number of shares times the current value of those shares. So the market cap of Facebook. What do you think it is, Barry?
It's going to be extraordinary. Something, I don't know, £20 billion.
How much?
20 billion? No, maybe it's going to be more than that. Probably 200 billion.
Okay. What do you think, Darian?
I don't know. I was just trying to cheat and Google it, but I've only got the price of one share, which is $114. I guess there's
cheating.
Oh, good heavens! No, I've just seen the answer. Okay. The market cap of Facebook, according to this very naive Google search, is $325 billion.
Yes, that's absolutely true, and it has been up to $500 billion, and some people think it will one day go up to $1 trillion. So the point is that social networks, certainly right now, they are potentially, and obviously, these things can go up and down, but potentially it's worth a huge amount of money, and it's the sort of thing where $26 billion, although, like you say, it's in cash, so it's coming out of Microsoft's back pocket right now, $26 billion actually may not look too expensive in a couple of years' time.
Well, the thing that there's two things I'd say to that. One, if this was sort of a venture capital firm buying LinkedIn, your argument may have some ground, I'd say. But the Microsoft is clearly looking to embed LinkedIn into its own company. It's not. This isn't Microsoft buying up companies to look to sell them on in 5 years' time. Microsoft clearly has a vision. If you look at the press releases and videos that they've put out over the past few days, to build LinkedIn into Microsoft's other products, and the most obvious way appears to be Office and SharePoint. And I've seen a lot of speculation about Microsoft bought this to become the internet's address book for businesses, effectively, which is a reasonable. What do
you mean by
aim and goal?
What do you mean by it? Address book.
So, my Outlook contacts, for example, right now, there's probably about 40-50% of those contacts are redundant, dead, because when someone changes their email address, changes their job, changes their telephone number, that contact just becomes instantly out of date. So what they're talking about is that people tend to update their LinkedIn profiles when they move jobs. So if that's just a live data stream that filters into your contacts, it just live updates. So that horrible thing of going through your contacts book and the person you called is no longer there goes away. Now that's great. That's a really I can see that being a valuable service to Microsoft. I can't see it being worth $26 billion. Not even in the slightest. The other thing is Microsoft has a terrible record of integrating purchases. And there's a very good example of this in Yammer. Yammer was the big business social network about 5 years ago, which Microsoft paid over $1 billion for at the time, I believe, which now looks like small change. But they sort of they didn't quite know what to do with Yammer. It sort of staggered on almost independently for a year or two. Then it sort of fell into SharePoint and effectively becomes the sort of back. But it's sort of. They've sort of integrated the technology into it, but the user base appears to have evaporated entirely from what I can see. It's sort of a few big corporates, but Microsoft is sort of vanished as an entity, Yammer. And I look at Nokia, look at all the massive acquisitions it's made over the years, and not one of them has been a success. And moulding two companies and two cultures like that is very, very difficult, and I just don't see where the value comes back here for Microsoft.
Although they do say they want to keep it running as its own culture, as its own separate company, in the same way that the different branches of Alphabet, what was Google, are meant to be running together. That seems to be.
They always say that, though. They said that about Nokia. They said that about was it a Quantive they bought? I mean, it's just. That's always a typical thing that companies say when they acquire somebody. Google says this all the time, and then 2 years later that company just gets sucked into the org and vanishes. Yeah, so I don't buy that. And I think exact figure, they pay $260 per user, basically what the value is here. And even when you accept that, it's a lot of users, 430 million users. That to get that kind of value back is extraordinary.
I feel like a lot of what Microsoft does lately in the past couple of years is kind of as if every move they make is a last ditch effort to save the company, which to be honest, that's what I think is the reality for them in some ways. I know when I say save the company, I know Microsoft's future is fairly secure because of things like Azure, because of servery, because of enterprisey stuff, but it obviously really wants to remain a force on the desktop and in the consumer kind of arena, and the on the professional desktop, let's say, it wants to be on the laptops that you and me and and managers and IT managers and bosses and CEOs are carrying around. And I think it's very realistic about how easy it would be to take its eye off the ball and just let that slip away forever. So maybe Microsoft itself, by the way, has a market cap of about $400 billion. Not, of course, that it can just realize all of that, but it gives you an idea of the relative sizes of LinkedIn and Microsoft. And when you put it in that context, if this is something that can help it be more persuasive as an enterprise, as a name that has to be involved in your business, it has to be involved in your enterprise, then maybe it's bought cheap.
Well, I do think it's one where we need to hold judgment, because I think the answer will be, it's like so many things, the answer will be so much clearer in 2 years' time whether or not this has been a success or not, because there are data is so valuable, so they've also bought a lot of data by doing this, so that shouldn't be underestimated. So that figure you gave of about £150, I think it is, per user, Barry.
Yeah, $260.
Yeah, so that if you think that you can, there are companies out there that basically they just mine data, they just look after data, and then they sell it on to companies that need the potential leads from it. You start to look like this, and this is a live database that kind of self-manages itself. You can actually see that it has some inherent value there. So it is completely different to the other things that it's bought. It's not like Nokia. It's not like Yammer, which actually always felt like it was vulnerable to attack from the likes of Slack or even Microsoft's own services. So this could be looked back on as a very wise strategic move.
Yeah, I'm quite excited about it. I mean, excited is very much the wrong word, but I mean, when Barry says about the problem of when you go through your contacts and find people are just no longer there and they've moved on, I mean, if they could make it work so that you'd go into Outlook and you'd say, I'm looking for such and such a person, and you'd immediately get the information that person is no longer there, but it would be pull up the person who's taken their place. That makes Outlook an incredibly powerful tool.
It does, but it also it can stand completely independently of Outlook, can't it? So I think if they can make it like this ultra professional social network, like it really should be, and sometimes it slips into not being that, then it could be incredibly valuable. It could solve a whole load of problems that we currently have, and that's just one of them. So yeah, I applaud the move. We should say at this point to anyone watching this live, please feel free to submit questions to us if you'd like us to tackle something. We'll avoid all the hard ones, needless to say, or I'll just give them to Barry. It's one of the two. Unfortunately, Barry's father is not here following the hangout this week. He's on holiday, so we are going to rely on other people to ask them questions as well. But yes, if you fathers up, we'll keep an eye out for them. Right, let's move on to the second story of today. Darian.
Yes, hello. So Billboard magazine in the US, as part of its WWDC coverage, or in fact probably the entirety of its WWDC coverage, had an interview with the guys who run Apple Music, which is Eddie Q, Vice President of Content and Media Apps. You can see my eyes nipping off to the side because I haven't memorized all these people. Sorry, Eddie Q is Vice President of Internet Software and Services. I can't believe I got that wrong. So embarrassing. Robert Kondrick, Vice President of Content and Media Apps. Jimmy Iovine, who is, I don't know what he is, and this is the important bit. Anyway, this is what we're getting at. Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails is one of the, Nine Inch Nails. He's one of the guys who's kind of behind the scenes directing and advising and consulting Apple Music. And he said to Billboard, he was quite upfront about sort of why he's hooked his star to this particular wagon, or vice versa, and why he supports Apple Music. He said, and I quote, let's dig out the precise phrase, he says that YouTube, which is, as we all know, where Duyute get a lot of their music. If you want to hear a song, just go into YouTube, type in the name, and it comes up.
Is this still you quoting?
Yes. This is all just actually the name of the guy who runs Apple Music. No, he hasn't. What Trent Reznor said was that YouTube's business model is, and I quote, very disingenuous. It is built on the backs of free, stolen content. That's how they got that big, said the Nine Inch Nails singer and spokesman for black hair dye.
And what do you think, Barry? Do you agree with Trent Reznor?
Yeah, I do think there's a degree of truth in what he says. I think yeah, a lot of the most popular content on YouTube is either stuff that's been ripped, virtually any television show. Often, when you're joking around on Twitter or something, and you want to find a clip from Blackadder or Only Fools and Horses, as I posted into the thing earlier. This makes me sound really sad, but it's all on there. Like virtually anything you can name that's heavily copyrighted that YouTube clearly has no permission. It's been ripped off a VHS cassette half the time. YouTube has pretty much any piece of video content you ever want to find. And there's a lot of other stuff on YouTube, original content. I spend a part of my day writing a Minecraft magazine as well, and there's a lot of very big Minecraft channels that are specifically broadcast on YouTube, and I'm not denying I'd say about a 50-50% split between YouTube original content and stuff that is pretty obviously just ripped off. And YouTube's never really comfortably addressed that. It's turned a blind eye, and I think largely because the copyright holders are reasonably complicit in it, because Google gives them some means of getting compensation for advert clicks around that content. So I think most people don't tend to kick up too much of a fuss about it.
Well, I think that's right, and that's YouTube's defense. YouTube responded to Mr. Reznor's comments, pointing out that the overwhelming majority, this is a quote from them, the overwhelming majority of labels and publishers have licensing agreements in place with YouTube. And it is absolutely right what you say, that you can find anything you can imagine on YouTube. It's if I want to find a particular scene from The Young Ones, it's there. If I want to find an old song from the 60s, it's there. And the thing is, I agree with Trent Reznor as far to the extent that it was put up there illegally. There's no doubt about that. It was put up there by someone who loved the song, not by someone who had any right whatsoever to do that. But I think what that gives us is an incredible, wonderful resource. I think it's a fantastic part of being alive in the 21st century, that you can say, hey, have you seen this skit? Have you heard this song? And you can just call it up and it's there. And I think the fact that the copyright holders, the content industry, they've kind of, as you said, they have been complicit in this. I think that really sort of vindicates YouTube to an extent. I think they've done incredibly well out of that old maxim, it's better to ask forgiveness than to seek permission. And while I think Trent Reznor is right, I think if you look at what the world would be like if YouTube, made you go through a very lengthy process of proving that you owned the copyright before anything went online, I think we'd be poorer as a society.
Yeah, and from a content producer, the original owner's point of view, then you could surely say, well, you're going to get money out of that you wouldn't actually get. Like, take Father Ted. Are they losing out sales, do we think, because of box sets, let's say, because those clips are on YouTube?
It's a difficult one. It's always impossible to really prove what the actual losses are. The rise of things like Netflix is making it even harder. Of course, it's kind of making the question a little bit more moot, and the things get a bit more foggy. But when you say about are the content producers getting money? Trent Reznor has, to be fair, put his money where his mouth is, and he is working with Apple Music to promote a different model. And he says that this rather than he said he went through a grumpy get off my lawn kind of phase originally when he saw the way that the internet was in his views devaluing the music that he was making and the art he was creating, and now he's kind of really working to promote what he sees as a better model where the artist has more control and where the artist gets paid more. Whether that's a better model for society as a whole, however, whether that's a better balance, a better negotiation between the content creator and the content consumer, I think that's a question with no answer.
Although you'd always have to say, is it a better model for actually the content creators with the highest profile, so the people who've really gone beyond that tipping point, rather than those kind of struggling to make it? Because this is the thing, isn't it? Sorry?
You get a tipping point of your own when you slap that with your hand.
Oh no, I'm very excited when I talk about this, Barry.
I think the other point to make is that the copyright owners are incredibly bad at creating archives of their own content. So I've railed against this in the past, but the BBC, as we mentioned, these shows like Fools and Horses or The Young Ones or whatever, you can't go and get those online. there is no authorized place really. I mean, I know some of those shows on Netflix and whatever, but if I just want to go and find that 30-second clip of Del Boy falling through the bar or Rick from the Young Ones doing something, I hated the Young Ones. I can't.
You hated the Young.
I really hate the Young Ones. But for the benefit of the tape, Darren's just walked off.
All right. No, all right. Go on then.
But that doesn't exist, and YouTube does serve a need there. I can see that, but it is absolutely true also that it is earning a living off stolen content, and stolen's a pejorative word, but content that it doesn't own a copyright to, and they've got away with it. They've absolutely got away with it, and I'm sort of amazed that nobody over the years has taken them to court and sued them for it, but. The YouTube, they're a big company. Who's going to take on Google?
Not me. I can say that much. I can also confess that I do not like Only Fools and Horses. I could never watch a whole episode of that. It's just
you think you know somebody. I've been working with these guys for nearly 10 years, and most of it seemed to make sense at the time. But...
Do you like Only Fools and Horses?
Only Fools and Horses is a comedy classic. I mean, you can look at it now and say it's a bit dated, or you can say, the sets look like they're made of cardboard sometimes, and the acting likewise. But it's a part of our culture. It really is.
It is, but there's only one funny bit of Only Fools and Horses, and
there's two.
No, there's only one, which is when they're mending the chandeliers. And they're doing it so well. They're there holding it up, and it's going to be fine. And then it cuts to the scene, and they're protecting the wrong set of chandeliers, and the others crash to the ground in the background.
So I suggest the viewers, the two viewers who don't know that already, just look it up on YouTube because you're ruining the comedy just by explaining it.
Everyone's watched it. I'm sure people, millennials are born, and they will have already watched it in the womb. It's such a part of our culture. Okay, go on. Unless anyone's got anything to add to that.
Just going to say that I remember I spent a lot of my youth going to the likes of Benidorm and Mallorca, and all you would get in every single cafe is wall-to-wall Only Fools and Horses on flickery VHS tapes played on a loop. I can virtually recite you every episode of Only Fools and Horses, basically from 2 weeks in Spain through my youth.
Please don't.
No, I won't. Let's move on.
Okay. All right. Before we go on to the next story, David Chilvers has asked. This is going back to the LinkedIn story. If they flog personal data, can I ask how many days will it take before they have no users left? I reckon they probably already are selling on that data. I'm sure there's access to data that you can get through LinkedIn. In the same way you can. It may be anonymous, but or anonymized.
No, it's not. It's definitely not. I mean, how LinkedIn makes its money is if I am, I'm recruiting somebody for my company.
Yeah.
I can go and pay to get access to all the people that match the profile of the person I'm looking for. That's how it makes the money. That, and there's no doubt Microsoft wants hold of that. That is valuable. That is the only value really currently within LinkedIn. That companies will pay big money. Yeah, and we even the Dennis we've worked in have recruited people from LinkedIn in the past. It does happen, but
I think it's also true.
It's whether that's worth £26 billion dollars.
I think people aren't as assiduous about removing themselves from sites, quickly and effectively as they should be either. I think, because you're on so many sites, and it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be just a case of, you go and log on. There's a big red button saying click here to remove all trace of your login from our servers. So I think, to be honest, to be cynical, I think they could put whatever they wanted in their terms and conditions, and 5 years down the line, they'd still have a very healthy user base.
Well, the other thing is about LinkedIn, sorry, just to finish, is that you go on there specifically for that purpose. Everybody on LinkedIn is secretly doing it because they're hoping they're going to get a great job offer from somebody. And that's the only reason you're on LinkedIn. If you just want a social network, you go to Facebook or Twitter. It's not a social. Nobody really interacts, as far as I can see, via LinkedIn. It's basically a forum to publish your CV and hope that Manchester United come knocking for me next week.
I'm not sure. I don't agree with that. I think I actually find it quite useful if I meet someone in a professional environment. So at a do or whatever, then it's the best way to say, hey, good to meet you yesterday. And then you actually have some way to keep in touch. I can't do that on Facebook, can I?
Are you saying that you'd like to add them to your professional network on LinkedIn?
With a little hyphen before, yes, I am saying that precisely.
You can always tell when somebody's just about to either be sacked, made redundant, or looking for a new job, because there's suddenly the activity of so-and-so updated their LinkedIn profile. It just suddenly starts building for a couple of weeks, and as soon as you get that email, here we go.
Yes, please recommend me. Please recommend this skill. I notice you haven't yet recommended me, Barry, but we'll talk about that.
I find that the most pointless activity in the world, but
recommending
thank you for all the people who have endorsed me, but it is ridiculous.
Well,
I'm just going to endorse you now.
Yes, anybody who knows Barry on LinkedIn, please endorse him and
But there are people on there who have never met me, know nothing about me. I've never worked with them in my life, who endorse me for skills. They don't know anything about me. So if I'm not basing any opinion on those endorsements when I'm recruiting people, not like I do much recruitment these days, but it's such a completely useless metric.
Right. I'm going to unendorse you in lots of different areas just after this call. Right, WWDC. So I forgot what it stands for. Worldwide Developers Conference. Isn't that right, Darian?
Yes, that's right. I'm actually not sure if it's developers or developer, but if we don't draw attention to it, we'll probably get away with it.
As long as you don't say that, we'll be fine. Anyway, it happened this week, and it's often the launch pad for hardware. But there was no and finally this time around, because really it was very much about software tweaks. And I'm kind of in two minds about this, whether or not it's the world's most boring set of keynotes, or whether it's actually also the most useful set of enhancements. Because really, you could say that so much of the hardware that's out there from Apple is already very, very good, and the areas where it needed to focus its efforts were actually the software. And there's no better example of that than probably the Apple Watch. You've got a Sony smartwatch, haven't you, Darren?
I have. Yes. Here it is. Look.
Yes, and Barry, I know you've got a Pebble.
I do.
You are. Okay, if we're going to do that game, I've got a TomTom.
A TomTom?
Yeah.
Are you a car?
Surely, again, how do you not know this, Darren? But this is a fitness watch, so it's not a smartwatch as such. I don't even get notifications on this. But anyway,
that's just a watch, Tim.
It's got a heart rate monitor. It tells me how slowly I'm running. Effectively, yeah. Anyway.
Oil temperature gauge.
Moving on to the Apple Watch.
So I left at the bathroom, Tim.
Thank you. Okay, right, stop heckling. So the key thing here is that the Apple Watch is now faster and slicker. And so some people have complained previously about the Apple Watch. You almost had to go through about 7 different steps to get to, let's say, setting a timer is the example they gave on stage. And so now it's much more natural in terms of the demo, what I've seen. And so you kind of call up the thing. There's none of that fiddling around with little floating bubbles like there was before.
That was like supposedly a key feature. They led with that when they introduced the Apple Watch.
Absolutely, and this is always why you need to be very careful when you listen to these people, because they do talk absolute rubbish and then quietly shelve it 2 years later. But it turns out, not everyone liked that as an interface because it was very bad. What is good, though, is the button on the right-hand side, which I think has been copied now by a few people.
Now, that's not a button, it's a crown.
Yes, I do apologise. So the crown idea, which has never been used in a watch before, this idea of a rotary dial. But anyway, that does seem to be working much better. It is much smoother. That's one of the enhancements that it gave. And then all the rest of it was really things like Apple Music getting a refresh, 2,000 more publications being put onto Apple News, Maps getting a refresh. A lot of people have complained, I think, Barry, you complained about this in the past, that their standard apps, so there's things like their Photos app and their, give me an example, Notes. Sorry. But they're Docs. So they're not actually as good as third-party apps, and some of them actually, especially.
Sorry, I thought you were saying something different. Ignore me.
Okay. but a lot of people have complained they'd like to get rid of them, and now it is possible to deprecate. You actually remove some of these, or at least put them out of the home screen, or tuck them properly out of the way. So they've listened to people from that point of view. They've made them nicer to use. So all these little things, all these incremental changes, it's all very nice. But one of the things that really came out very clearly is that there's still Apple is still a very insular company. It's still very much, it just wants you to use its devices. And my question to you two is whether that's actually a viable thing to still be doing in 2016, when I'm using an iMac, I'm using a Windows laptop, I've just moved to an Android phone, so I'm using this whole different collection of devices, and actually Apple now, it just feels like it's swimming against the tide from what I can see.
Well,
firstly, I'm concerned because I think Windows Phone has just lost its last UK user, so I think we should mark the passing of that particular milestone at the very least. But sorry, gone down. I interrupted you.
No, I was just going to say I did laugh when Craig Federighi said, and we all do our shopping in Safari. I mean, I don't know anyone who uses Safari in this cross-platform world.
Yeah.
I think, can you still get Safari for the PC? I don't even know, to be honest.
Yes, you can. Yeah.
But I think it's perfectly reasonable actually for Apple to be, because what they're doing is they're not forcing you to use anything in particular. They're just kind of trying to give you more reasons to. And one thing I was particularly interested in was the improved integration between iOS and what's now called macOS.
Yeah.
Things like the shared clipboard and the way that you can now use the thumbprint reader on your iPhone, if indeed you have one, to authenticate payments in Safari. I think that's good. I think that's actually a clever use of the fact that they own the ecosystem, and it doesn't feel like they're just being annoyingly restrictive. It makes sense that it would require, or it would use the frameworks that they own, and it would use the thumbprint reader that they've created and that they trust. So no, I think actually I'm actually more interested in Apple the more coherent and the more tightly bound together their ecosystem gets.
So you don't think that they should be reaching out to other platforms?
Well, when you say other platforms, I mean, do you mean should they be creating, the Stocks app for Android or something? I don't think that's
well, actually, a very good example that came up is iMessage. So iMessage is a great system that allows you to talk to another Apple user, whether they're using a Mac or a phone or a tablet, doesn't really matter. And then you can just send the message. All you need is an internet connection, and it can pop up on the phone like a text message, or like an IM bar on their Mac. And that's a great system, and so there's an argument, why not open it up to Android, let's say?
Yeah, it was rumoured that they were going to do that, and they didn't, obviously. And fair enough, I think it would be smart for them to do that, because I think, WhatsApp or other services like whichever 3 chat programs Google are pushing this month could come along and eat their lunch, as it were. Could just close off that market. They could come up with something which makes, which just kills off iMessage somehow. So I think Apple should be doing that, but they haven't tightened the screws on iMessage. They haven't, they're not trying to shut people out. I think it's just something that they didn't get around to this time.
iMessage is an appalling system, and if you ever go from an iPhone to Android, you'll find out why, because it basically takes a grip on your text messages, and you'll move over and then wonder why for like 10 days you haven't got any text messages, and it's because Apple has basically taken control. And what happens so I have an iPad. I still have an iPad, but I've stopped using an iPhone. But every time you update iOS on the iPad, Apple reclaims iMessage, and so you just don't get text messages for a few days because they're all popping back into iMessage now. It's a ridiculously bad system, and you'll find hundreds of millions of complaints about it online. The point I think you're making about Apple interacting with other devices actually came up in, is it HomeKit they call their sort of smart home thing?
Yes,
where they're trying to have a interface for all of your smart home gadgets, and I think that's really smart if they can pull that off. So that the problem with smart gadgets at the moment is they all have their own app effectively. So if you have a Nest app. If you've got the sort of smart plug Wemo system, then you need the Wemo app to do something with them. Apart from if you use something like IFFT, I don't know how you ever say that website's name, but basically you need a different app for every piece of smart kit you've got. And from what I could understand, from what I saw of the Apple keynote, they're trying to provide a common interface for all of those devices in the home. So from one app or just from the notifications menu, basically you can say, well, I want the temperature to be 30 degrees and turn my washing machine on and set the Wi-Fi kettle working. And I think that's really smart, but what Apple doesn't have is a great history of working with lots of different manufacturers in an open way. It tends to say, well, here's the way we're going to do things, now join that. And if Apple can be a bit smarter about that, and this whole business needs to be a lot smarter about creating an open platform and open APIs where everyone can, any device, whether it's my Android smartphone, my iPad, can act as a controller for all the stuff in my smart home. That's really exciting. My fear at the moment is that both Google and Apple are trying to dictate the terms for the sort of control of those markets for the reasons that Darian mentioned, that Apple wants you to buy more Apple equipment and Google obviously wants you to go down Android. I think if the entire smart home industry can agree to some common standard that everybody hooks into, we'll all be a lot better off.
Well, not everyone. I think Apple won't, and perhaps Google won't. But Google has been investing in the Works with Nest program. I don't know what's happening with Nest. This is completely by the by. I haven't really read up on this, but I heard that, was it Tony Fadell left Nest recently after it had apparently become a pretty disastrous place to work with all the original staff who used to work there when Google acquired it, moving on. So I don't know what's really happening there. But I mean, yeah, no, I would love it if we could all agree on some very simple, straightforward home automation, home, Internet of Things protocol. But I don't see the pressure for it. It looks to me much more like, it will be, well, I've got the iPhone that's got the Apple hub on it, so I'm going to buy Apple things. I think well done, Apple.
Yeah. Well, I think we are dreaming, aren't we? Really, if we're expecting that to happen. All right, let us move on to our hot hardware of the week, and this is where I turn to you. Actually, before we go there, so tweeting Benners, I think that's correct, asked us on Twitter what our favourite headphones are. Anybody got any favourite headphones?
Favourite headphones? Well, I mean, I've been getting really into. I've got some Bluetooth headphones at the moment, and once you, pardon me, if you ever travel by tube, I think once you go Bluetooth, you won't go back, because I get so fed up of just my cable getting, caught in people and so on. But the actual headphones themselves are not very good, so I won't name them. I do mean to get some better ones.
That was Barry quickly looking at his to see what brand they were.
I know what brand they are. I just don't know what the make of it is. These are Sennheisers this is basically a sort of dedicated gaming Sennheiser headset, but it works very nicely. It's very cushioned. I think the C950s, I think, literally off the top of my head, but I'll have to double check on that. But they're always really comfortable, and they shut out a lot of the external noise really well. So yeah, these are a great set of headphones, but they're quite pricey, about 150 quid.
Yeah. These are mine. This is a box. Sorry, I can say it very easily. So it's a SteelSeries Siberia 350. They're mine. Where are you going? Where are you going again?
If we're all showing off our headphones, I mean, these are the ones that I use for music-y stuff. These are the Sony. Well, you can read that. I can't. These are very, very common in the media industry, because they're only about, I think, 60 or 70 quid, and they're supposed to have a really good frequency response, but actually what that means is they've got loads of treble and you have to compensate for that. But they're nice.
Well, what I was going to say is that my eldest son, is actually very jealous of these headphones because as
they light up.
To see, they light up, so they're proper kind of youth gaming headphones.
But you can't see that. Everyone else can see that your ears are flashing, but you don't get that joy.
Yeah. They're basically the headphone equivalent of Heelys, aren't they?
Yeah. But I want Heelys. We're on adult Heelys. Okay, before we move on to the hardware, let's just hear from Mike Bookham, who has written in to say the issue that he sees with Apple is that they're constantly trying to tie you into their ecosystem more than any other. Once you buy an iPhone or iPad, then unless you buy another of their devices, you're not getting the full benefit of the Apple world. I agree. That's exactly what their business model is almost built on: selling it expensive and then making you buy something else expensive. It works very
encouraging you, incentivizing you to buy something else expensive.
Yeah. I do take your point. They do make very good products. But anyway, let us move on, as I have said I'll say it for the third time, to the hot hardware of the week. Darian.
Yes, well, since we've been doing these video podcasts, we've started allowing ourselves to discuss things that we don't actually have in our hands, because obviously that would be difficult to arrange. What with this being distributed across a 80-mile per side triangle. This week we're going to talk about something that doesn't even exist yet, but I think you'll get the idea. Basically, it is the Xbox One Project Scorpio, and also kind of by implication the Xbox One S. These are new iterations of the Xbox, which Microsoft has confirmed the existence of, and in fact showed the external hardware. I don't think we've actually seen one working yet. And what's interesting about these is that the One S is a smaller version of the Xbox One, but it also has beefed up graphics which enable it to support 4K, unlike the original Xbox One, which maxed out at 1080p. And the Project Scorpio is yet more powerful, has even more more stream processors, one presumes, which means it can do not only 4K, it can do VR. I don't know what the actual resolution is, but I mean, you'd assume that we're talking at least 720p per eye, probably 1080p per eye. Who knows? Maybe 4K per eye, maybe 8K per eye. But the point is, there are now 3 Xbox Ones, which are at different levels of computing power, basically. And Microsoft has said that this is the way it's going to be now. So the Xbox, the original Xbox was a known, stable, static hardware platform. Likewise, the 360. But the Xbox One becomes basically a continuum, and you buy a game, and if you've got the original Xbox One, then you'll be able to run it at a certain resolution, a certain frame rate. But if you've got a more powerful Xbox, if you've got a Project Scorpio, or if you've got whatever the next Xbox after that might be, then you'll be able to run it at higher resolutions and maybe using additional detail settings. So basically, the whole idea of the console as the closed static unit is kind of being thrown out the window a little bit by Microsoft in favor of turning the console into basically a pre-packaged PC. That's it.
Barry,
I think. Well, yeah, I think there's. I mean, I own an Xbox 360. There's always been a degree to the Xbox One. Sorry, there's always been a degree of this as well. There were different versions of the Xbox 360. They were on the second version already, Xbox One. So they've always iterated the hardware, but I think what they're doing here is something more substantial, where you're talking about different resolutions. Certainly, when the VR is coming into play, that's a whole different ball game. And I think there is a worry here for that they're trying to increase the hardware cycle a little bit. That they're trying to, because actually the consoles of lifetime cycles have been extended and extended. I think that the gap between the launch the Xbox 360 and the Xbox One was 5 or 6 years, which is, consider the gap that was between the PlayStation and PlayStation 2. It seems to be lengthening. And so what I fear here is some kind of creep back towards accelerating those hardware cycles, make you think, well, Xbox One I paid £300 for a year ago is now going to be largely redundant in a couple of years' time because I'm not getting the same detail settings as the guy who's playing me at Call of Duty on a 4K screen, and I'm at some disadvantage here. So yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about this move.
I don't know though. I mean, because the flip side is we may presume that you'll be able to buy games, that come out further into the future and still run them on your old original Xbox One, albeit at lower resolution settings, lower detail than you'd get with the console that comes down the line. They've explicitly said that the idea is that Xbox One will just be the platform from now on. So maybe in 5, 10, 15 years time, we'll have that same degree of compatibility that we have on Windows on the PC side. And in fact, it's worth mentioning that also when you buy a game for your Xbox One from now, or from when the program is properly instituted, you will also get the rights and the code to just play it on your Windows 10 PC via Games for Windows as well.
Well, this is it, isn't it? I mean, what they're basically creating here is effectively a PC. I know I've read a few things online this week of it. What you're creating is the PC market. The Xbox One is in fact the operating system here, even though it's effectively Windows 10. But those games are also going to be playable across PC. So the great unique selling point of a console was that you knew when you put the disc in that it was going to work and it was fine. You had all you needed. And now Microsoft appear to be blowing that boundary again. They seem to be wanting to turn the Xbox into a sort of quasi-PC with different capabilities. So at some point, I suspect you're going to get games that say only work with Xbox One S or above, or certainly in the case of the VR stuff, it will only work with a certain model of the hardware. And they've been doing this a bit for years. There were certain games that you needed to connect to use some of the features for, and that never really worked. But I wonder if they're shooting themselves in the foot here a bit. I think they're veering towards making this too complicated, whereas Sony appear to be sticking much more to the more traditional console route and are doing much better this time around.
They are, but I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons for that, which include the weird positioning of the Xbox One at first, where it was kind of marketed as a multimedia TV consumption machine that also happened to play a few games. I'll tell you why I think this whole idea is hot, actually. And I know I'm not going to be in the majority of consumers out there, but I might just about be in the majority of PC Pro podcast listeners. Is that it's not really the backward aspect that excites me. It's the forward compatibility aspect, because I've always been, and I make no bones about this, I've always been a Nintendo fan, and I've always enjoyed playing Mario games and so on. And it kind of, it bums me out that generation after generation, if I want to play an old game, first of all, it normally won't run on my current generation console, even though the console itself is 20 times more powerful than the one it was designed for. And secondly, when I actually stick the disc in or the cartridge or whatever to the old console and hook it up to my modern TV, it looks rubbish. The graphics just have not aged at all well. And the idea that henceforth, if I buy an Xbox One game now and then in 15 years time, in a fit of nostalgia, I want to play it on my 10-foot display wall, the hardware will it will be upscaled nicely. It will work, it will be beautiful, and we won't be in this kind of that was that generation and now that generation is wiped out and lost and forgotten. It becomes much more of a continuum.
This is always the argument. The legacy is always the argument. Every time you move from a console, people say, I want to play my old games on the new console. And they did this. They experimented with it. The PlayStation had it, I think, between the 3 and the 2. And when they looked at the research, the number of people who were playing previous generation games on the new console were vanishingly small. It was less than 1%. And Microsoft are making some effort to do it with the Xbox One to Xbox 360. But it's when there's so little appetite to go back to games from previous generations for the very reasons you just explained, that the graphics are much poorer, and a lot of the games today, like the biggest selling titles, the FIFAs, the Call of Duties, are just almost serials that you replace annually, and so those games are just not as good as the one you've got currently.
Are you backtracking, Barry, on your point last time that PC gaming is niche? Because Michael Oswald, I'll probably say that incorrectly, did send us very kindly a link pointing out that there's more money in PC gaming than there is in mobile gaming. Take that, Barry.
On a revenue basis, this one set of figures from an analyst seems to suggest it outweighs mobile income from mobile. The thing I'd say is, in terms of volume of users, I'd love to see the figure. I don't have them in front of me, and I wish I did.
But we know.
But
well,
so
you can divide it by 10 in terms of revenue per user, can't you?
At least. So it's you know, in terms of the amount of people playing PC games compared to people playing games on iPhones or Android devices, it's vanishingly small. It's like 2 or 3%.
So there you go, Michael. There's an apology from Barry. All right. So very, very quickly, hot or not? Very quickly, because we're out of time.
Not for me, but I'm worried about the whole the way that's going. Scorpio is clearly a play for the HoloLens, and HoloLens and Minecraft, as I said the week before last, I think is fantastic. But
okay,
we'll see.
All right, Darian.
Yeah, as I've said, I think it's hot. I think it's the shake-up that that the console world needs now that we're no longer living in a world where where gaming means a plastic cartridge with everything burnt onto chips and a very, very well-known graphics processor and a very well-known, well-understood sound processor, and then the next generation comes along and all that gets thrown in the bin. I think this is better.
Okay. I'm so on the fence on this one. Because I'm on the fence, I'm going to say not. Clearly, it's not hot, but I'm more of a Nintendo person, I must admit, than I am an Xbox person. How often do you use your Xbox, Barry?
Pretty much 3 or 4 times a week, when as much opportunity. The problem is, it's in the lounge, so I get outvoted by Coronation. Yeah, the kids. So it's rare opportunities.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. All right. So we're just going to quickly end. I'm showing this to the camera, which is useless on the audio version of this podcast. But this is the new issue of PC Pro. It's out on the shelf. So if you aren't a subscriber, then I command you to go and buy one immediately, because it's got an excellent feature by Dave Stevenson, all about fixing the unfixable. So that's things like iPads and iPhones and just the movement that's gathering around that. And it's poorly edited by Barry, but the actual feature itself is still very good. And Barry, you took the CS50.
Yes, so this is a online computing course. It's actually it's Harvard's most popular course at Harvard University in the States, and they do some fantastic materials that allow you to basically do the whole course online via YouTube, and they publish all the course materials and the exams that they set the students on this course, and it was really good fun actually. I watched the first 4 or 5 lectures and learned quite a lot, so it's definitely worth a look.
You're a new man. I can see it already. We've also got a shootout of budget phones, of budget Android phones. Having talked about those, and Darren, there was a certain group test on printers, wasn't there?
Oh heavens, yes, that was that. Yeah, it's been quite a month. Yes, 10 printers. 10 may not sound like it's not like 100,000 printers, but when you're actually putting them all on a bench next to one another and printing and timing and testing and comparing the quality and comparing the speed and all of that, it's a bit. Well, let's imagine that you've got a printer. How much grief does that one printer give you? Now imagine that multiplied by 10. So I've been through that, so that you out there in in the real world, you can know the strengths and weaknesses of this variety of lasers and inkjets. Almost all of them color, almost all of them multifunction devices with scanners and faxes and so on. Basically, you do need a printer. I know it's 2016. I know you shouldn't, but you do need a printer. You probably need a new printer because your old printer is probably rubbish and it's probably clogged up and it's probably costing you a fortune to run. So please, don't make my work have been in vain. Read this 16-page or whatever it is, epic.
I'm going to stop you there before tears come into your eyes. There were also 4 printers tested by Dave Mitchell aimed at businesses. So if your business needs a larger, medium-sized business needs a larger printer, we have one for you there as well. Okay, on that note, we shall say thank you very much to everyone watching this live. If you get a chance, do try and do so, just to keep us company. The next one's going to be in 2 weeks' time, 6:30 p.m. On the Thursday, almost certainly. I'm hoping, I think I promised this last time, but I'm hoping to have a guest along for that one too. So all that remains to say is thank you very much for listening / watching. Until the next time, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.